Resolution to approve amendments to the El Paso County Parks Rules and Regulations. Tim Wolken, Executive Director, Community Services Department, and Brian Bobeck, Park Operations Division Manager.
Good morning, Commissioners. If we could, I have the PowerPoint. Thank you very much. We're appearing before you today to talk about potential amendments to the county park rules and regulations. And we'll go to the next slide. And essentially what we do every year with our park staff and also the Park Advisory Board is go over the comments being made by citizens throughout the previous year in regards to potential changes to the park rules. Also looking at safety concerns, customer service issues, comments from our staff as well. And the bottom line is we're looking for a safe and enjoyable experience for all park users. And so if we can make tweaks to our park rules, hopefully we can be able to achieve that. Once again, safe and enjoyable really is kind of our mission when people are coming into our park system. We have just two for you today. The first one is the operational hours for the regional parks. Prior to this discussion today, we are at 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. for our regional park system at this point. What we're proposing is 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. Based on the following comments. Under A, you can see the other regional park systems along the Front Range. Most of those are sunrise to sunset, dawn to dusk. And so shorter hours than what we operate, and I'll go through the rest of the comments, but I think you'll see why they operate along those timelines. We don't have any lighted facilities currently within our county park system besides parking lots, so you can certainly ask yourself, is it good for citizens to be out in the park system after dark from a safety standpoint? Once again, looking for safety and enjoyable experience. We've also noticed an uptick in our vandalism within the county park system. We did incur about $10,000 of direct cost in vandalism in 2018 to parking lots, restrooms, and signage. In addition to that, that we do have some social events that occur in our park system from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. that aren't scheduled. And what ends up happening is you have leftover bottles and cans and those types of things within our parking lot areas that we have to clean up the next day. And so we'd like to avoid that if we can. We did a public comment period in this particular rule change, and we had 143 citizens respond to us during that public comment period. About 70% of those were in favor of the rule change. Commissioners, questions of me in regards to this particular rule change proposal?
Any questions? Nope.
Second rule change that we're proposing today is the off-leash dog rule. Those of you on the commission a couple of years ago, we did go to kind of a pilot program of rather than having dogs on leash within the county park system outside of dog parks, we went to dogs being under control in the park system. During 2018, we had 81 comments called into the county park office in regards to this rule. 68 of those would like us to go back to the dogs must be on leash. And so a lot of the comments related to dog versus dog issues within the park system. There were several individuals that were bit by dogs, mainly in the Fox Run area. We had some dogs versus equestrian issues as well. So those were some kind of a summary of those 68 comments that we received throughout the year. Under B, we have had some confusion from county park staff, Humane Society, law enforcement, on exactly what a controlled dog is. It can certainly vary from person to person. One individual may have, when a dog comes up to them off leash, it's a very friendly, outgoing dog. The other person will say this is an aggressive dog. And so it's challenging for law enforcement and others to be able to determine, especially if they're not there, what may have occurred, during that particular incident. Under C, most of the jurisdictions in the Pikes Peak region do have the leash rule. So if you're on the new Santa Fe Trail and you're going between the Air Force Academy to the town of Monument to the town of Palmer Lake, you will have different rules for the dogs versus being on leash or off leash. And so it could be a bit confusing for citizens and probably the dogs as well. Under D, there is some concern about pet waste removal with dogs being off leash. They're not typically as close to you as what maybe a dog on leash would be. Also impacts on wildlife. We did the same public comment process for this rule change as well. We had 306 comments. I believe that may be a record for county parks. But it's a 60-40 split, 60 going back to the leash rule, 40% preferring to keep the current rule that we have. Wanted to give you a heads up that we are adding 2 additional off-leash dog parks in 2019. So we'll have dog parks at Fox Run, Bear Creek, Fountain Creek, and Falcon. So really all different parts of the county will have an off-leash dog park. So if we do go back to having dogs on leash, at least there'll be opportunities. If you want your dog to be off leash, there will be 4 different areas within the county to be able to do that.
So how does that work? There'll just be a special designated area within Fox Run Park where you can have your dog off the leash?
Yeah, it's actually fenced, Commissioner. And so, yeah, in Fox Run, I think it's about a 15-acre site that's fenced. It has trail system in there as well, and you're allowed to take your dog off leash in there. And we'll have the same thing in Falcon. We're having a grand opening in mid-April we'd like you to join us for, and then also the other sites as well. The Park Advisory Board did address the potential changes on February 13th. They were in agreement with the changes. What was kind of unique with our Park Advisory Board as well, in addition to we had about 10 people speak, about half and half. Half wanted to have dogs remain on leash, half did not. But the Park Advisory Board also had their own stories of issues that they also encountered as well within the county park system and dogs off leash too. So all were in favor of moving forward with the amendments that we have. One question that came up during the Park Advisory Board meeting was e-collars and whether we would allow an e-collar versus a leash. We were directed to do investigation on that, and what we found was e-collars are a great training tool for dogs. We weren't sure it's really something you could use instead of a leash. We couldn't find any jurisdictions in the area that allow e-collars as well. Certainly that's open for discussion today. If you would like to allow e-collars versus a leash, we can certainly consider that and include that within the rule itself. Final comment from me, one thing I think our park security staff does a really good job of is using common sense on enforcement of our rules. I don't think you're going to see hundreds and hundreds of tickets given out because of dogs not being on a leash. What we're looking for is safe and enjoyable, and so we're looking for the extreme cases. So if you've got a dog that's very well controlled and you're out in the middle of a park system someplace and there's not anybody near you, the odds of you getting a ticket for having a dog off leash probably is quite slim. But if you're certainly within an area where there's lots of people where a leash is really critical, that's something we're going to react to at that point. But we use really good common sense. And it's not our goal, it's not a way to generate revenue, it's just to make sure safe and enjoyable for everybody. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Wolken? All right, seeing none, I believe there are some folks in the audience that would like to speak to these rule changes. Is there anybody here that wants to speak in favor of the rule changes? Please come on down. And if you would, state your name and sign in before you begin. Or I should say, sign in and then state your name and begin. Go right
Susan
ahead.
Davies, Trails and Open Space Coalition. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. So our advocacy committee and our board of directors both weighed this issue and decided overwhelmingly that we wanted to come out in support of this proposed change to the parks rules for leashed dogs. The Trails and Open Space Coalition was formed about 32 years ago, and it is our mission to preserve open space and parks, creating a network of trails, bikeways, and greenways for the Pikes Peak region. And there's overwhelming evidence that parks bring economic benefits to our community in terms of health benefits, quality of life benefits, property value benefits. They bring tourists. But there's the assumption that they be safe. And I think even we who attended the last Parks Board meeting and hearing from some of the people in the audience were quite surprised at the level of concern that people shared with us as far as not feeling safe in our parks. So at the end of the day, we have to support policies that make people feel safe so that they want to use our parks. If they don't use our parks, they don't bring value to anyone. While we're disappointed, we were excited when the county made this change. We thought it was exciting that there would be a little more latitude and allow people some freedom. But on the other hand, if some of our users don't feel safe and if have suffered dog attacks or their dogs have been attacked, then that doesn't work. So we do support this. We do think the fact that it is in alignment with the city's park policy for governing dogs is probably also a good idea because people do get confused. And at the end of the day, we want people to use our parks and feel safe in our parks. So we hope that you support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. All right. Anybody else that would like to speak in favor of the rule changes? How about those that would like to speak in opposition to? And sir, again, if you'd please sign in and then state your name, you may begin.
Sure.
And if there's anybody else that would like to speak in opposition, please just come on down and, kind of get ready. We appreciate that.
Good morning, Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Richard Sullivan, a longtime resident of the community and a daily user with my German short-haired pointer dog Dutch at Bear Creek Park, actually the area by the tennis courts and the archery range. There is a path that winds itself back and forth through, I don't know what that is, 20 acres maybe, something like that. As I said, for the last 4 years, we have been daily attendees there. And I have to say, I was somewhat confused by the regulations when it talked about an uncontrolled dog. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but your webpage question and answers clearly said that a dog could be off leash. So we were happy. My dog's a high-energy dog. He moves around a lot. The dog parks just aren't for him. And at the park advisory board meeting, there were speakers who spoke about how dog parks aren't for everybody and every dog. And that's the way we are. But I do have an e-collar, and when I push this button, Dutch is right there. He can be 30 yards off, I push the button, he's right there. I see other people in the park with the e-collar, and their dogs are the same way. If we see another person or another dog coming, we call the dog back and we hold him by the collar just to make sure, because we understand that some people just are terrified of dogs, whether they're on a leash or not. Frankly, my bigger concern are older people with a dog on a leash that decides to lunge at something or somebody or some dog, and they get knocked down because they're tied to the dog. I've seen that happen. I've never seen an uncontrolled dog at Bear Creek Park, and all the time that I go. I'm usually there like about now or earlier, and then again 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At the park board meeting, there was a lot of discussion and back and forth and negotiation, both on the hours and on the leash rule. And I thought that the park advisory board came to a good compromise along the line, and they did include an amendment to the proposal that included specifically defining an e-collar as an acceptable tether. And I'd ask you to put that back in. The fact is, your rules in the past have been kind of hard to understand, and the enforcement gets hit and miss. I just assume it be clear that an e-collar written into the rule is a tether. So if you have questions for me, I'd happy to entertain them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for this gentleman?
But the park board, the park advisory board did concur that that was a reasonable way to go. Mr. Wilkin has kind of come up with some new stuff, and it surprised me when I saw the proposal online that was different than what we thought we had come to consensus on. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak in opposition?
Hello, my name is Sharon Post.
Can you pull the microphone around to you, ma'am, or
I'll
speak to
walk
that
over
one?
here. My name is Sharon Post. I'm a dog owner. I have been really enjoying the Bear Creek Park. I have never run across a situation where there's been any altercations. Of course, I put my dog on a leash when I'm near any wildlife, other people with their dogs on leash. I can no longer take my dog to the Bear Creek Dog Park because he ends up with a GI problem, and it's a $170 minimum vet bill. The big thing is that most of my fellow dog owners were not even aware of this situation. Why was nothing posted at the regional park saying, this is a proposal? Any comments should be sent to these addresses. Most people that I know don't get the Gazette, And I only saw one article on in the TV regarding it. So I don't think you've gotten everyone's opinion. So that's all. I just wish that we could get a little more input from the public that does like dogs off leash. And like I said, I've never seen any altercations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, anybody else like to speak in opposition to the proposed rule changes? All right, seeing none, Mr. Wilkin?
Just a point of clarification. The Park Advisory Board meeting, they did ask us to investigate e-collars, and we did do that. I talked to the county attorney's office, went online, researched e-collars, and so, but certainly it's up to you to decide whether you prefer that e-collar also be included within, whether it's a leash or a tether, and we're happy to work with that.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing else from the public, I'll bring it up here. And County Attorney, my understanding is we can adopt the rules as presented. We can adopt one of the rules. We can amend the rules. We have lots of options.
You're absolutely correct, sir.
All right. Who would like to kick off the discussion? Sure, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for the information. I would say I did receive a couple of calls on this. So 3 were against the change, so they wanted to remain with the off-leash. 1 was for that because of safety. I don't believe I had any comments on the electric collar aspect of it. But not a lot, but some. Of interest. I remember we did talk about this a couple years ago. I think it's been almost 2 years since this kind of came up. And some of the things, the concerns that I have today are the same I believe I mentioned 2 years ago. So concerns of reliability, if we are the people that say it's okay to be dogs off leash in areas and then something happens. So I always have concern about the liability that the county, as stewards of taxpayers, for El Paso County might have if we have this off-leash as our official policy. Pet waste. I don't know if I told the story before, but before I was elected, walking in parks, everybody knows I like to hike the local areas, and I was at a park or a trail, and dogs off-leash a couple times, no owners in sight, and that's a regular occurrence, is seeing a dog without an owner, and then 30 seconds later you see the owner of the dog. In this case, pet is doing what they do out in nature. I see the owners come up, dog meets back up with the owner, and of course I'm like, I think your dog just did, what?
Made a mess.
Made a mess out in the, it's like, oh, that wasn't my dog. And I was like, okay, I mean, not much. I'm not going to confront somebody over that. But things like that happen, and things are more likely to happen like that if they're off leash than on leash. And then the last thing is, even if dogs are safe, a lot of these trails that I go in, there's always areas that are called delicate habitat, reclamation, do not move on here because you're causing damage. And the dogs, if they're off leash, they may be perfectly safe, but the dog's not just going to stay on the trail. The dog is going to come off trail, even if they're safe, and perhaps disrupt some of the reclamation projects, areas of nature that are a little more sensitive than others. And so there's still other concerns on top of the safety, which is, for me, still an issue in terms of liability. So those are my concerns, and so I'm likely, I believe at this point, going to support the changes.
Anybody else like to, any other commissioner like to comment? Commissioner Williams.
So I will support the changes. I am interested in considering for the future, the electronic leash. I think that if you're a dog owner and you've got your dog that well trained, it's certainly something that we should consider allowing in the parks. So, but these changes I support because I do think it is a safety issue, and I would think that if an electronic leash idea should be considered fully by the advisory board, before something comes up to change it.
Commissioner Brimmer.
I would agree with Commissioner Williams there. I think that clearly we've heard today from some very responsible dog owners, but at the end of the day, not all dog owners are as responsible as you who cared to show up today. And For that reason, I'm willing to consider the electronic collars as well. I would also like some input from the Parks Board on that, a little more time to research it. But I do believe that it's our responsibility to ensure, as Ms. Davies said, the safety and enjoyability of our parks. And unfortunately, sometimes rules have to be made because not everyone is a responsible dog owner. So I appreciate your input today, but I am in favor of these changes as presented. I do want to hear more about the e-collars very shortly.
I agree. I find my colleagues' comments persuasive, that's for sure. This is a really tough issue. It is. I want people to be able to go out and enjoy the parks, and I want them to be able to go out and have their animals and pets enjoy the parks as well. Unfortunately, this is one of those circumstances where we don't get to regulate to the person that is being a responsible pet owner. We have to regulate to the person that's not being a responsible pet owner, and that puts us puts us where we are. It's too bad. I think it would be great, though, after these are adopted today, if we could send direction back to the Park Advisory Board to do a little bit more research on these electronic collars and figure out if, maybe we need to be the entity in the region that's leading the way on making this happen, if it's the right and responsible thing to do. So I'd appreciate you taking that feedback back to the Park Advisory Board and seeing if there's something we can do there.
Will do.
All right, with that, I would entertain a motion if there's nothing else.
I would move to approve item number 11, the resolution to approve amendments to the El Paso County Park Rules and Regulations.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, and I'll call the roll. Commissioner Brimmer.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. That passes 4-0 with Commissioner Vanderwerf excused.
Commissioners.
Okay, before we get to public comment, we are going to take a 5-minute comfort break. We will stand in recess.